Hi, I'm Susan Lewis from WRTI. I'm here with Paul Laraia. He's a violist in the Catalyst Quartet, and they're out with a new project, a new album called Uncovered, the music of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
It's great to have you.
My pleasure.
Now, you were one of the original members of the Catalyst Quartet, which was founded in 2010 by the Sphinx organization. Is that right?
Yes, more or less. I've been playing in the Catalyst Quartet for almost since its inception.
Okay. Well, how did you get involved in music? And you grew up in New Jersey, right?
I did. I grew up in South Jersey in Washington Township, and I started playing in my local school program in my elementary school. And as I got a little bit more serious, I was doing regional orchestra auditions like All South Jersey, and I did New Jersey All State. And at a certain point, I needed a teacher upgrade more or less. So that's when I started coming into Philadelphia for my lessons and for my other programs. So I did the Settlement Music School in the one in South Philly. I was a participant in Temple Music Prep, the young chamber orchestra, and I did chamber music there. And so Philadelphia was a huge influence on my life, not to mention that I studied with Che Hung Chen and CJ Chang in the Philly Org.
That's great. Yeah, they're great. So Catalyst Quartet has had amazing success with concerts and touring and residency and collaborations, and won a Grammy.
Yeah, well, what we did is we were on the Grammy-winning album with Cecile McLaurin-Salvant. It was an amazing experience. We were so happy when that happened.
Yeah, well, that's really wonderful. Well, could you talk a little bit about the mission of the Catalyst Quartet? Your materials talk about a goal of redefining and reimagining the classical music experience.
Yes, so the Catalyst Quartet, I would say in a nutshell, we want our concerts and our programming to be about something more meaningful than just, the typical, we like to say sometimes classical music is presented like a museum piece, just sort of kind of be studied from the outside, doesn't necessarily have relevance to today. And we want to make sure that everything we do has relevance, that it reaches people, that it expands diversity of repertoire, diversity of audience. Our programming runs the gamut in terms of genres. We do everything from our own arrangements to Baroque music. We play the Goldberg Variations on string quartet. That was our debut album. And we're starting this new project that uncovers historically Black composers. And we have a huge commissioning project coming up that commissions 10 diverse composers. So that's basically it.
Well, that's pretty exciting. So this album that we're talking about today, of the music of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor, is one of 3 that are part of this project.
Yes, and potentially 4 or 5. When we first began trying to collect all of the string quartet applicable works of historically Black composers, as you might expect, we actually began finding much more music that didn't have proper publishing, that we didn't like. It's not as accessible as it needs to be. And so the project kept growing from our initial sort of trajectory to make sure that we cover as much as we can.
Right. So talk about why Samuel Coleridge-Taylor is the first. He's a pretty interesting character.
Yes. Well, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor was a very historically influential composer. He was very famous in his time in his native Britain, but sadly, he kind of fell out of vogue ever since then. And so we thought it would be a perfect choice to go with his music for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's such gorgeous, romantic music, and a lot of people have said that it's very similar to Dvorak, similar to Elgar, Brahms. So this language we knew would be a really powerful way to sort of kick off the message that that the music of these composers is absolutely a part of the canon. It's just that it has been shut out and people don't know about it enough.
Right. You also say in the materials he wanted to incorporate music from spirituals the same way Brahms used Hungarian music or Dvorak used Bohemian music.
Yeah, absolutely. And although it's not explicit in this on this album, his use of this, because a lot of these are earlier works of his where he was just sort of really trying to create perfectly crafted works in the model of, the European model. But it's not explicit, but you can definitely feel already the influence of spiritual, although they're not per se full on spirituals. And in particular, if you listen to the probably the most gorgeous movement on the album, is the second movement of the clarinet quintet. You can definitely feel that vibe in that movement.
I've been listening. The album is just beautiful. I mean, there's drama and joy and dance numbers. It's really great. So there are 3 chamber pieces. The first one is the quintet in G minor for piano and strings with Stuart Goodyear on piano. You, as a member of this quartet, have gotten to play many, many times with your quartet members. You know each other very well. There must be a certain almost finishing each other's sentences musically when you get to know people that well. What's it like when you collaborate with somebody else?
Well, I'll tell you, it's extremely exciting, actually. It's invigorating. And, there are so many, exactly what you said, there are so many benefits from having that relationship with your colleagues, your full-time colleagues, but there are also benefits of freshness and from spark of creativity. And Stuart brought in so many fresh ideas. He was really passionate about the project. Really, from the first rehearsal, he had a really good idea of what he wanted to say with the music. And then the other thing is, he has such a gorgeous sound and such a gorgeous architectural way of enlightening a phrase. And so it was just a pure joy of inspiration. I would say is definitely the benefit to playing with new people. And that's something we strive for. As another reason why we wanted to begin with this album, is because we knew we were going to have very strong collaborators with Stuart and Anthony.
And as a violist, what are you drawn to particularly in this music?
Well, definitely, I would say that there is a soulful yet folksy underpinning to many of these movements, to many of these works. And I mean, the humoresque definitely sticks out to me, which is the third movement of the Fantasiestück. And it's extremely fun to play, and it's very fun to listen to. It has so much character, has charm, it's virtuosic. The viola part is just sort of like, it's going the whole way through, it's almost like a perpetual motion. But so even though the viola part may not be the main line, it's always infusing the music with character and with content.
Right. And the last work with Anthony McGill on clarinet you mentioned that second movement really is moving.
Yes. And I mean, the entire work, I think, is sort of maybe his strongest and the work that has the most gravitas. He was sort of challenged because the Brahms clarinet quintet had just come out within a decade or two beforehand. And all the students at conservatory he was with were sort of faced with this challenge from their teacher, where he basically said, I challenge all of you to attempt a clarinet quintet that didn't show too much of the influence of that Brahms piece, because it was so monumental. And I believe that Samuel Coleridge-Taylor was the only one to really be able to come up with such an original work with equal amount of gravitas.
It sounds as if when you prepare to play these pieces, you really do learn a lot about the composer. Do you think, could you describe that process for you?
Wow. It's a bit indescribable, because it is something that you learn with your hands and with your ears and with your heart. And as you dissect, especially the next part of our album project is going to be devoted entirely to Florence Price. And I think Florence Price's music has gotten even less playtime over the last decades or so. Like, there are a couple of really fine recordings that existed of this Samuel Coleridge-Taylor music before we recorded, but the Florence Price is, you would be very hard pressed to find polished, complete recordings of this music. And so it's especially noticeable when you're sort of like getting inside of somebody's language for the first time. You know what? I can only relate to it. Actually, when I was studying Brahms for the first time at Settlement Music School, and that density is so confusing, you know, when you're trying to read through those quartets for the first time. It's very confusing. And individual lines, you feel that they have so much content, and then you get confused because another line interplays off of it. And I would say that that's the most comparative thing I can think of in terms of learning these new voices and these it's extremely satisfying, I have to say.
So in learning about the composer's life and where they lived and what kind of obstacles they were facing, and does that helps you interpret?
Yes, that also helps too. I mean, I would say we probably first try to go from a place of a sonic place. I think most composers would hope that, you know, the music can speak for itself on firstly, but then the next level of the next layer of diving into their music and interpreting on a deeper level is exactly that. And what I mean, that's also, I think, exaggerated in Florence Price's music, because she just had so many more explicit influences in terms of like gospel, blues, just the music of the 20s in general. So it's a little bit like actually going on a historical dive in her case, I think pays dividends for the way that you approach some of this music, especially because her unique style is a little bit less in the model of pure European. And so to make sense of putting her music in the European model does require a big cultural contextual dive, I think.
Wow. Well, it's interesting because as a listener, when I hear this music and it's so beautiful and it kind of pulls you into it, and it does make me curious about who wrote it. And so when you get this music out there, you're publicizing the music, you're giving a forum for the music, but you're also kind of opening a door to having people learn about these composers.
Yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of goals to this mission and to the project when we set out to do it, and definitely that is a huge part of it. And I think probably the ultimate goal, if we had to put our finger on it, is to get this music played more often, to get it recorded more often, so that it does become their stories don't become this sort of like novelty in that just the few know. You know, everybody should have access to their stories and to their voices.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks so much, Paul, for talking to us. This is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the next recordings that are coming out as well, but this one is really beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.